Добрий вечір всім. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anya Shpuk, and I am Associate Director, member of Ukrainian Institute of America, and Vice Chair of New York chapter of Ukrainian American Business and Professional Association. I'm actually very happy to wear these two hats today, representing both organizations that partnered to create this, our first event, success stories of its series, Hourglass, and represent this to you today. As you know, we are here at this beautiful New York City historic landmark, Ukrainian Institute, which in itself became a vision of its founder, William Zeus, who was not only generous philanthropist, but also a great successful businessman. And isn't it the best place to hold their event is really the Institute, right? For those who, and I also want to encourage you to get involved, come to these fantastic events that Institute holds, become a member, because again, we have different events that happen in here, from arts, music, Piss and Key workshops, literary nights. Become a member and enjoy your time here. For those who are new to UABPA, the association was established in 2016, and it's really the resource for Ukrainian American business people to help each other grow, operate, and start the business. And hopefully by becoming a member, you help each other to do that. Now, before we start the event, I would like to also thank our sponsors of today's event. First of all, Veselka restaurant for catering this event, especially its owner, Jason Burchard, and chef, Dima Marcinyuk. Also, Bauer Dental Arts, Dr. Oris Bauer is here with us, so thank you. Nova UI Federal Credit Union, located in Clifton, New Jersey, represented here by CEO Valery Bohachuk, Chairman of the Board, Dr. Michael Levko, and also Mykola Kuciolik. Miss America, represented today by Yuri Volk, who is a marketing manager. And Self-Reliance Credit Union, located here in New York, Manhattan, represented by its CFO, Oris Temnitsky, and CEO, Diana Maksimiv. Дякуємо. Also want to thank Emil Brandafi and Valiant Video Productions for capturing today's events on its video, and hopefully you can all view it afterwards. Thank you, Emil. And I want to acknowledge Miroslav Kastran from Consulate of General of Ukraine. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our fabulous speakers of tonight. It's Mr. Leonard Mazur, who is director and chairman of the board of Cedius Pharmaceutical, as well. He's also a member of Ukrainian Institute of America and UIBPA. Also, Mr. Yaroslav Azhnuk, who is co-founder and CEO of PetCube. And our moderator of the event is Ivana Lutoshinsky, who is the chair of the board of Ukrainian American Business and Professional Associations. She's also a co-founder and president of People Wealth Matters, Inc., that is financial planning firm. And Ivana was also involved in many Ukrainian initiatives, Ukraine-focused, especially when it comes to fundraising and charity for Ukraine. So welcome and enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our guests, please, you're welcome to get on stage. Okay, gotta be careful here. Check. Well, what an exciting opportunity to have you both gentlemen here with us tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I will go straight to business. I do have these blue cards that are supposed to help me, but I think I left my wine somewhere. Well, Leonard. Levko. Dobre. We are going to have our discussion in English, but everybody is welcome to speak Ukrainian, of course. So Levko, Leonard, thank you again for being here tonight. And you are currently an executive chairman at Citius Pharmaceutical, an entrepreneur, instrumental in creating enterprises within companies, and the founder of pharma companies, of different pharmaceutical companies. 50 plus years in pharmaceutical career, is that right?
That is correct. I don't want to admit that, but that is true.
When we were preparing for this event, our Ukrainian American Business Association members of the executive board have submitted tons of questions, and I realized that many of these questions were actually answered by you so many times at so many conferences and at so many events that you attend as the entrepreneur. And I would like to open this part of our discussion with the video, which is from Jupiter, Florida, that you were just there.
This is Shelley Kraft coming to you live on SNN Live. We're at the Dawson James Securities 4th Annual Small Cap Growth Conference 2018 in Jupiter, Florida. With me today is Leonard Mazer from Citius Pharma. It's a publicly traded company, and the symbol is CTXR on NASDAQ. Leonard, welcome to SNN Live.
Shelley, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you again. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
It's good to have you back. But let's get started with a brief overview for our audience on the company.
Sure. The company is a development stage pharmaceutical company that's engaged in the development of a phase 3 drug known as Mino-Lok for the treatment of central line associated bloodstream infections known as CLABSI or catheter-related bloodstream infections. Both of those terms are used interchangeably.
Now, what's some history on the company?
The company history is that it was actually the merger of two companies, one private, known as LMBRX, and then Citius, which was the public entity. That merger took place about 3 years ago. And the company basically got started by the private side of the company, began with the entering into a license agreement with MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas, which is the #1 cancer hospital in the world, for the license of Mino-Lok, which is a drug that was studied at MD Anderson for the treatment of central catheter-related bloodstream infections. So LMBRX merged in with Citius because we wanted to take advantage of the public markets, although we had been funding the development of Mino-Lok ourselves with our own money. I should point out that to date, management and founders have invested $23 million of their own money. I personally have invested $18 million into the company, something that probably you won't hear from most public company executives. And that's not stock options, that is direct cash into the company.
What is the competitive advantage of Citius?
Where Citius has a real competitive advantage is that it likes to focus into drug categories where there's, first of all, an unmet medical need, and secondly, where we have no competition, if at all possible. So in the case of Mino-Lok, for example, there is no drug on the market today for the treatment of that infection. The only treatment that is standard of care would be remove the catheter and replace it, which entails 2 separate surgical procedures with an adverse event risk profile of somewhere between 18 to 25%, and can have devastating and deadly consequences for the patient. So, and there is no drug, as far as we know, under development or under study in this indication. So once this drug is approved, we will have the market to ourselves.
What is the target market and how big is it?
The target market is those patients that have catheters implanted into them. There are 7 million patients annually that receive a central venous catheter. Out of that total, about 500,000, approximately 500,000, the catheters get infected. So it is a sizable market. There is significant market potential. The rate of infection here is significant, but outside the United States, it's probably even more so, where standards in the hospital are of a lesser quality than they are here in this country.
What's your background?
My background is I have a bachelor's and MBA from Temple University. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. And basically, I started out in the industry with a company called Cooper Laboratories back in the 70s. Spent 10 years there, then went to BASF as a director of marketing, then to ICN Pharmaceuticals, which today is Valiant Pharmaceuticals, as a VP marketing, where I launched ribavirin at that time. And then came back to the East Coast to be executive vice president for a publicly traded company known as Medicis Pharmaceutical, which had a very successful exit a number of years ago. And then I went, at the ripe old age of 50, I became an entrepreneur. And at the worst time in your life, probably everybody will tell you, you take the greatest amount of risk because you have everything to lose. And fortunately, I was able to start up several pharmaceutical companies with very successful exits. And myself and the CEO of the company, Myron Halubiak, who has a great background also with Hoffman LaRoche, we got together and we formed a private company back several years ago, and then merged in with Citius.
Now, from what you can tell me as a public company, what are some growth drivers?
The growth drivers for us will be the approval of this drug. I should mention we also have a second drug under development that's in the hemorrhoid category. It's very strange, but in the U.S. market, there are no FDA-approved prescription drugs for the treatment of hemorrhoids. You have the over-the-counter side of the market, which is dominated by Preparation H, and then you have prescription drugs that are prescribed that are known as DESI drugs, which are older drugs that were on the market at the time the FDA was created, and doctors are prescribing those older drugs that never went through any FDA trials. So the opportunity here for us is, we know it's a big category, 10 million patient visits, no approved prescription drugs, but our plan is, because it is such a large, massive category, would require massive resources to promote and market the drug, to out-license or monetize that drug once we complete a phase 2B trial, which we would anticipate completing somewhere in the course of 2019.
Leonard, let's get your website out there for more information for our audience.
Sure. So the website is citiuspharma.com. So that's CITIUSPHARMA.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Leonard Mazur, Citius Pharma, publicly traded company. The symbol is CTXR on NASDAQ.
Thank you very much for this video and this presentation here. We're not going to repeat it, but there is an extensive resume here in our program that we can all read. And as I said, 50-plus year pharmaceutical industry. Why pharmaceutical industry?
Well, I would like to say that I grew up wanting to be in the pharmaceutical industry, but I didn't. I'll be candid about that. Life is a random walk, as you find out, especially if you're a liberal arts graduate like I was. And I really didn't have any specific career goals as a psychology major when I was graduating from from Temple University in those years. But as what happened, my random walk led me into the pharma industry because what I used to do is I used to read the want ads when they were around in those days. And what caught my eye was there would be an ad under pharmaceutical sales, and it said company car expense account. I thought, you know, that sounds like a good deal. So I managed to secure a position with this company, Cooper Laboratories, which for me turned out to be just the right company for me personally because the company was exploding at that time growth-wise. So as a result, what happened is I really took a liking and almost I would say I had a real passion about the pharma industry. And and I encourage everybody that no matter what happens in your life when you're starting out, if you can just secure a position somewhere and take and really look into that industry, do anything they tell you to do or they ask you to do. You can be a janitor, you can be anything. But if you really have a passion for what you're engaging in, ultimately you will rise up. No doubt in my mind about that. And this country has plenty of companies, plenty of industries. There's lots of opportunities out there for especially for young people today, no matter how it looks, no matter how tough it is to get a decent position. It's never easy. It's never been easy. But I strongly encourage everybody to find something they really like to do. So for me, it turned out to be pharmaceuticals. I really liked it. I wasn't really in love being in pharmaceutical sales, I'll be honest about it. But what happened for me is that I happened to have identified early on, just one of those happenstance things, the gentleman that was my boss would come out and work with me every 2 months. We'd spend 2 days with me. We'd go around visiting doctors' offices, and in between we'd go out to dinner. And he would say, so the very first time we were out, I was probably on the job 6 months, and he said to me, have you thought about what you want to be or what your career path should look like? And I said to him, you know what, I've given that a lot of thought. I said, first of all, I don't want your job, meaning I don't want your job as a district sales manager. I would rather go into the marketing side of the company if I can get in there. So he took note of that, and getting into the marketing side of the business was very difficult because there weren't that many openings. There were a lot of sales representatives, but the whole entire pharma industry back then probably had no more than 200 people in pharmaceutical marketing per se. So I was fortunate that a year and a half later after that conversation, I got the opportunity to go in and I got promoted into marketing research. When I got that position, I didn't ask how much they were going to give me. I didn't care what the relocation allowance was. I didn't care about anything. I wanted that job. So, and again, that's very important for everybody today. What I notice about people getting promoted, all of a sudden they start making demands. Don't make any demands. Get the job. Take the job if it's offered to you, no matter what the cost is. So, and that became a very critical move, and I'll just add a quick aside about this. I remember at that time, I was living outside of Philadelphia, had a company car, had the expense account. My father comes up to me, and he goes, "Shote robisz?" I said, "Tato, it's like this." I said, he said, "You've got it made here. You've got a company car, you're your own boss, you get up whenever you want to, nobody bothers you." He said, "Why would you want to leave? Well, we're here, everybody's here, all your friends." I said, "Well, it's like this. It's like a Hollywood casting call." I said, "Hollywood called and I got to go because I'm only going to get that call one time." And that's how that went, and that's how my whole love for the industry started that way. That's how it evolved over time.
Дякую, thank you. Levko, Leonard, why did you decide to go from corporate to entrepreneurship, security of the paycheck, the car, everything that goes with it, versus risk, uncertainty, and you were 50 at that time? Can you tell us a little bit more
Sure.
about that decision?
So I think I always had this, I had an entrepreneurial itch inside of me, as I always like to say, and I had to scratch it. But what it is, also the fact was that two of the companies where I spent some significant time, Cooper Labs and ICN Pharmaceuticals. Cooper was run, and it was founded by an entrepreneur by the name of Parker G. Montgomery. He was a Boston blue blood, and he was brilliant deal maker. He made 150 acquisitions, if you can imagine this. I was there when he bought a tiny little toothbrush company doing less than $1 million in revenue a year. The name of that toothbrush was Oral-B. He was just extremely successful, and he was a real inspiration for me in those days. And then I went out to the West Coast, and I was with ICN Pharmaceuticals, and I worked for a Serbian gentleman by the name of Milan Panic. And Milan Panic was from Yugoslavia and ultimately became the prime minister of Yugoslavia. He was a much different style entrepreneur. I always contrasted the both of them. I said Parker was a chess player and Milan Panic was a checkers player. But he was very successful, and more than anybody probably, I got so motivated by the fact that I had to really go the entrepreneurial route, spending 4 years working in that environment, which was hard. It was a difficult place to be. Even though I was a corporate officer, I had it made, but it was a hard place to be. So I had to take that plunge. I knew if I waited longer, I would never do it because life would be just too comfortable. It was already comfortable as it was. You know, you have stock options, you have everything you want. You have access to private jets. You have the whole scenario is yours. And one day you say to yourself, I'm going to walk away from it. And when I walk away from it, I can't look back. I can't miss it. I got to really do this. And I did it in a very difficult fashion. I started my company with no backing. I had to use my own money. And there were times that I brought documents home for my wife to sign over our house and everything that I had. I did that at least 3 times. The last time I did it, I borrowed money from a gentleman that lent it to me at 25%, and I had to sign over everything I had to him at that time. And I knew that I lived by a motto, and the motto was, failure is not an option. That came from my Marine Corps days. And I just knew that I could not fail. I could not fail at all. And every day when you're in that kind of a mode, when you're starting up like that and you're by yourself, you realize that when you wake up every morning, nobody cares about what you're doing, only you. And you better propel yourself, and you better make it happen, and you better succeed. So all these factors came into play. I was fortunate in that, in the regard that I didn't start with technology. I didn't have any invention or a new molecule or anything like that. What I did is I pieced together relationships and I created my company around that. And I was fortunate that I had contacts both at the smaller company level and at the very large pharma company level, and both of them came together for me at the right time to get my company really off the ground at that time.
Great. Well, what was the first company that you created? What was the name of that company?
The name of that company was Genesis Pharmaceutical. My daughter actually came up with the name. And it was a dermatological products company. It had products that were actually prescription drugs and cosmetic drugs that were sold into doctors' offices, into dermatologists' offices. I had a pretty significant years of experience in dermatology with the marketing of several derm products, and I knew that market segment very well. I liked it because it was small. There were only 10,000 office-based dermatologists throughout the United States. I knew that you could penetrate that market with a smaller number of salespeople. So what I did initially is I found a small little company out in Michigan, Hazel Park, Michigan, called C&M Pharmacal. C&M Pharmacal was a family-owned business. The The son inherited it from his father. And the son was, he knew everything about manufacturing, but he knew nothing about sales and marketing. And I had gotten to know him at previous industry conferences. So I went to him and said, look, I said, how about if I put a sales force together for you? You'll pay me a commission, and and I'll make money that way. Now, I didn't have any salespeople at that time, but I knew the people that had a company called MMD, which stood for Medical Marketing and Distaff. They had hired all women, all females primarily, to call on doctors, and they were paid a fee for doing that by big pharma companies that, for example, they may have had sales force people calling on regular primary care docs, but they wanted somebody to call on specialties. They would hire companies like this to make those kind of calls, and I knew the principles of that company. So I went and cut a deal with them where I gave them a piece of the action. I gave them a piece of equity in my company. And I said, I'll give you a piece of equity. You don't charge me anything up front first, and I want 20 salespeople to be able to go around the country calling on dermatologists, selling these products. So they said, okay. So I got that underway. Then after about a year, I went back to the owner of that company and said, look, I said, this isn't going to continue this way because what's going to happen here is I'm going to producing revenue for you and you're growing, but one day you're going to turn around, you're going to just shoot me, and that's going to be the end of that, and you're going to benefit from the revenue. So what I really want to do is buy out your company. Now, I didn't have the money to buy out his company at that point, but he agreed to sell the company to me at a specified price. So then what happened was the same people that I had used for setting up my sales organization came to me and said that they had a contract with Lever Brothers to promote Dove soap to dermatologists, and that Lever Brothers was having a budget cutback, and they wanted to know, could I take on 50 people to call on dermatologists? And I said, well, it just depends on the cost. So they quoted me a real low number. I then turn around and I go to Wyeth Laboratories, big company, which is now part of Pfizer. And they had a drug called Minicin, which was an antibiotic that they had just stopped promoting, and I knew it, to dermatologists. So I said to them, I said, look, I have a sales force of 50 people, and how about if we promote your drug for you? And with that, they said yes. So all of a sudden, I went from 20 to 50, and it was a huge success. Wyeth loved it. I had one of the longest, they call that a co-promote agreement. So we had a very long one with them, very successful, made a lot of, I won't say a lot of money, it made money for the company. And ultimately, what happened is Pierre Fabre, a big French company, came along and said that they needed to have a presence in the United States market for dermatology, and that they had been studying my company for like 2 years, and that they basically, it was a $2 billion privately owned company by Mr. Pierre Fabre himself. Very successful company. I became their U.S. CEO after I sold the company to them, and then I went on from there to some other companies. So
Leonard,
that's how all that happened.
How many? How many companies did you create? We certainly don't want to talk about each company, but how many you created and what happened?
I could tell you this. So from there, what happened is I really couldn't deal with the French, so they were very difficult people for me. But so ultimately, I met somebody and we formed a partnership. And basically, we started another. I left the French and I started another dermatology platform company that we built up very rapidly. He and I raised a lot of money. Initially, we raised $150 million, if you can believe that, in one shot. And then we went on and we bought some drugs. We bought several drugs at the time. Legal drugs. Okay. I have to be careful with that. I don't. Every time somebody comes up and says, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm in drugs." we formed this company called Triax Pharmaceuticals, built it up to a nice size, sold it. There's a funny story behind it. The first drug we bought was, it was a generic version of Retin-A, which I'm sure everybody here has heard of. And we had it in our company, Triax. Ultimately, we sold Triax off to another dermatology company called Precision Dermatology, and there was really a funny story behind that. And he and I then decided to form a company called Acromax, which stood for his last name was Kravolka, and so it was a Kravolka, M-A-Z, Acromax RX company. That's how we named the company. And we built that up to, it's almost hard to believe, but we did this. We built that up in about 3 to 4 years to $100 million in revenue. And then what happened is he passed away. So unfortunately, and we sold off, since then, all the pieces of that have been sold off. But a funny story happened with that derm company, the first one that we sold everything to. They turned around about 18 months after we had sold our business to them, and they sold themselves to Valiant, which was at that time on an acquisition binge, buying out everybody. So I went to the CEO of Valiant and said, I would like to buy this generic drug back. And he said to me, I said, you're going to have an FTC problem. And he goes, he said, I have the best FTC lawyers in the country advising me, and they have guaranteed me there's no way the FTC is going to object to the transaction on the buyout of that drug. I said, well, your FTC lawyers aren't looking at the same numbers like I'm looking, and you've got a concentration issue, and I'll be hearing back from you. 3 weeks later, they called. And so what happened was, we bought that same drug back. And here's what I can tell you. Now, we had partners and everything, so, and the money sounds, the amounts are probably ludicrous, and they are a little bit, but we bought the drug back, and I can disclose all the numbers because it was all in publicly filed documents. We bought it back from him for $65 million at that point. And 18 months later, we sold it to Perrigo, another public company, for $415 million, making a huge home run hit for everybody in that process. So this was probably one of the biggest home run hits. It wasn't a grand slam, it was a platinum hit. So basically, and it's all about, the one thing you cannot dismiss is timing and luck. So, I always, I just know that. So it's got to work, it's got to come your way, it has to be, and there's a luck factor in any entrepreneurial effort, always there. You have to respect it.
And timing was right also, right? Did you make any mistakes? And are there any mistakes that you'd rather forget?
Of course. I've made lots of mistakes. So you got to make sure that your mistakes don't overpower your accomplishments. That's all. But no, I think when I look back on it, there were deals that I did that I probably shouldn't have done, that I overpaid, or that I made mistakes there. I remember one time. In fact, it was one of the very first one of the transactions that I worked on when I was at Cooper. I had gone from being in market research, ultimately into strategic planning and acquisitions, and then running one of the company's business units. And what happened was, I wanted an acquisition. It was an acquisition that I desperately wanted, and I finally got it. It was a divestiture at that time out of Warner Lambert, big company. And I did the whole deal. I did the whole transaction. It blew up on me 3 weeks after I buy it. Things just did not work out. There was a lawsuit filed and everything, and I thought that it was all over. And I went to, there was a company-wide meeting of all the executives at Cooper, and we're in this high-rise somewhere, and Parker Montgomery stood up, and as I said, he was the consummate deal maker, and he stood up and he said, look, he said to everybody, he said, everybody here knows about the transaction that was just done that Leonard worked on. Well, he said, none of you have done anything. He went out and closed the deal, but none of you have. And for that, I admire him for that. And that was it. So, it was a mistake, but it was something that at least he had the courtesy and the foresight to be able to encourage his executives, because he was his company was all about growing, and growing in that fashion. So yeah, but mistakes, absolutely.
Let's
Always-
switch gears a little bit. When I came to your office, I talked about how I learned about you the first time. I was actually through Ukrainian Catholic University. I know that you have been a donor. You have helped this university grow through your generous donations. And I remember I was asking you a question, which is the question that I want to ask you now, so you could share with the audience. How do you define success? What is it? What does it mean to you?
That's an interesting question because, actually that success has many different meanings. You can be, I'm not going to answer you the way I answered in the office.
It's all right.
Thought about it some more. So, you can be successful in many different aspects of your life. It's your personal side, your social relationship side, and a business side. And I always feel this way about success. I've always said this. I said, no matter which side it's on, once you've had success, if it's visited you once, it'll visit you twice, it'll visit you 3 times, 4 times, as many times as you want, because it's up to you to generate that success. So even when you think you're right on the throes of failure, I always like to say this: success is nothing more than failure turned inside out. If you think about it, there's a lot of truth to that little parable or that statement. So that's how I define success.
Thank you very much. I do know that you give back to the community. You give back to people that helped you to be where you are. And we do have some photos here that I'd like to put on the screen. Yeah. I mean,
That was in Germany, actually, in Ansbach, Germany. I was probably 3 or 4 years old, right before I came over with my parents in 1949.
I actually asked you for
Did I look like a typical German youth?
I actually asked Leonard for the photo from high school, and he didn't give it to me. But the reason I asked for the photo from high school is because you were one of the largest donors of your high school that you graduated from in the history of that school. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So I grew up in Philadelphia in a row house neighborhood, mostly all Irish, Catholic, Italians, and so forth. And I had a great experience there. I really enjoyed my high school days. And what happened is, ultimately, my neighborhood completely changed. It became totally a ghetto. And so as a result, my high school, the population reflected the population of that ghetto. And the enrollment shrank and so forth. And Catholic high schools today, they're an endangered species. There's no doubt about that. But, and so, what that high school was doing, though, is it was taking these kids, half of them weren't even Catholic, and they were saving their lives. And the way they were saving their lives is 92% of them graduated and went to college, which was nothing short of remarkable. For the last 2 years in a row, 100% have graduated and gone to college. So what happened back probably about 5-6 years ago, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia was going to shut it down, close it down. And I got together with a group, and we basically donated the funds because the tuition is $6,000 to $7,000 a year to go. And the profile on a student there was single-parent household, average income $30,000 to $35,000 a year. How's anybody going to afford $6,000 to $7,000? It's impossible. And if they can take the student enrollment was about, let's say, 450. If they can take that number of students and 100 some graduate every year and go to college and turn them into productive members of society, we're all better off as a society. no matter what their color is. It didn't make any difference. So we did that. That's what I'll say. That's enough.
Leonard, thank you. You donated $5 million to West Catholic High School. This is what I wanted to say today, and this is a fascinating example of giving back to the community, giving back to people who helped you to be where you are. You said these words through our conversation. You said these words that kind of stuck in my mind: respect, God. It's just community and giving back, grateful and appreciative of those people who helped you to become who you are.
Sure, and I want to relate now a story about two individuals who really played a very important role in my life. So the first one was actually a Ukrainian Catholic priest, and his name he passed away, Monsignor Peter Lippin. And what happened was, when we first immigrated to the United States, my parents wound up on a farm in the eastern shore of Maryland, and outside of Salisbury, Maryland. And there were a number of Ukrainian Catholic families that came over at the same time, so what they decided to do is they got together and they had a priest come first. Somebody came from Baltimore and say Mass one Sunday a month. Well, as it turned out, ultimately, the priest was assigned from Philadelphia, and it was Father Lippin. And Father Lippin, turns out, he's from the same tiny speck of a village that my father was from, Letnia, outside of Drohobych. They grew up together. They were friends. And so what Father Lippin did is he encouraged my father to get out of there. And what he did is he put him up in a rectory for a year. My father worked construction as a cement finisher. And my father would come home on weekends. He saved his money. He buys a tiny little row house in southwest Philadelphia. And all due to the generosity of Father Lippin. So I never forgot that. The second story deals with a gentleman by the name of Joseph Aberman. Now, Joseph Aberman was the owner of a furniture store in southwest Philadelphia called Ideal Home Supplies. And Ideal Home Supplies, it was a local furniture store, and they had a part-time job there that got handed down every 2 years to somebody else in the neighborhood. So you started in the summer of your sophomore year, and when you get to the summer of your senior year, you handed the job off to somebody else. So I had the job for 2 years with Mr. Aberman. And it was, I still have my original W-2 from those days. I made something like $500 that year, which was a big deal, okay? So what happened was my father got laid off just as I was starting college. And there was some doubt about what I would do, whether I would finish out the year or go to work and try to save money or something like that. So one day, I get a phone call at my house, and it's Mr. Aberman. Mr. Aberman says, come into the store, I want to talk to you. So I go to the store, and he said, look, I heard about the difficulties your father's having from somebody else, and that you're thinking about maybe delaying your second semester. He said, I don't think that's a good idea on your part. He says, look, I'm a Romanian Jew. He goes, and I only had a 4th grade education. Now, he had 2 boys that were at University of Pennsylvania students. Both of them were basketball stars. He says, and he goes, education is very important. He goes, I think you have a lot of potential. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a check. It's a blank check. You write in whatever amount you need and pay me back whenever you can. So I remember I went home and told my father about that. He broke down and cried. So I will never forget what he did for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Well, Leonard, Great story. Many more stories, many more questions are coming. We have a photo of you, being in Marine Corps. We're going to talk about that again a little bit later, but why don't you have a sip of water? Let's move on with our guest Yaroslav. The co-founder and CEO of PetCube. When I first heard PetCube, I have no idea what that is, and I went online and read about your company, and I was completely blown away. The information about your company is online, of course, and it's right here in our program. So today you are the CEO of PetCube, co-founder, and in order for our audience to know a little bit more about your company, I'm going to ask Yuri to play a video before you speak. Would that be all right?
Sure, absolutely.
Дякую.
Say hello to PetCube Bites, the smart pet camera with Amazon Alexa voice control.
I like smart. Can it spy on my dog?
Of course.
Even that small?
Beyond a doubt.
He's got a big personality.
Can it see in the dark?
Oh yeah.
That's my kitty.
Cute.
Can she hear me?
Crystal clear.
Who's a good boy? And what's that for?
You can load up treats inside.
And what treats can I use?
Your dog's favorites.
Oh. Can it play fetch?
Swipe up to check. Only net.
Swish!
Ralphie, where's my shoe?
Let's go back and check your video history.
You are loving this, aren't you?
Kinda.
Sorry, bud. We're out.
Treats delivery is scheduled for today.
Future delivered.
Can this thing walk my dog?
Sort of. We have tons of perks with our subscription. Dog walkers included.
But what if I don't have a dog?
Play with cute rescues.
Play with my pup.
Check on my cat.
玩我的小猫。
It's all about the love, baby.
Thank you. This is actually a video that was never shown in public before. You will not find it on YouTube. This is a video of our second generation product that we have introduced for the first time this January at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and will be launched for general public in April-May timeframe.
Дякую, thank you. And can you tell us the answer to the same question we asked Leonard, but it sounds why pets? Why?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting story. The idea for this product, or our actually first product, came from my friend and co-founder Alex, and he had a dog that was barking all the time when he was left home alone. And Alex, just like myself, both have background in computer science. So Alex was playing together with some electronics, and he basically set up a camera to watch what his dog is doing when no one's at home. And he thought of adding a laser pointer that can be controlled remotely on two motors to point across the room to play with his dog remotely. So he did that thing just for his own fun, and he showed that to us, his friends, and everyone was so excited. Everyone was like, hey, I won this thing for my dog. That was back in Kiev about 6.5 years ago. And then someone was like, hey, can you guys make it a consumer product? Can you put it on shelves? That sounded like a crazy idea. And then after some more time, we thought, okay, maybe we could make it a product. But the question was, okay, even if you make this product, is it big enough to be a company, right? So after doing some initial market research, we realized that the pet care market is really big. Currently, the US is probably about $70 billion, and it's maybe more than twice as big worldwide. And what is interesting is that in that market, you haven't seen much, like the market haven't seen much innovation over the last decades. And most of the products, even like the automatic treaters you could find, still now they look like they were made in the 70s, right? We have these amazing devices in our pockets, right? But our devices or products or software for pets looked so old school, so uncool. So we thought there was an opportunity to build this kind of Apple for Pets like company. And that's what we're building since then. The mission of the company is to connect pets to the internet and give them a voice. And that's what we're doing. So we're currently producing 2 interactive pet camera. One that you've seen is called PetCube Bites. It's an interactive pet camera with a treat dispenser. Another is called PetCube Play, which was actually the original camera with a laser pointer. And they allow you to see your pet, to talk to them remotely, and then to interact with them. On top of that, what we're doing is we're now, we've sold hundreds of thousands of these devices, mostly across the United States. And now we have all these videos that cameras see. Our algorithms can process those videos and understand the animal behavior. So that's where giving pets a voice comes from. And once you understand that a pet is bored or sick or anxious or wants a walk, then you can recommend pet owners the right products for that pet. Be it an insurance service for dogs, or a dog walker, or the right food for their diet, or an anti-flea product, or anything else. So basically the business we're building has these kind of 3 layers. One is the device layer, where you provide some utility and you get data from those devices about the pet behavior. The second is data processing layer, where you understand the data provided by devices. In the future, it might be other devices. So you understand the data and you understand the pet. And the third layer is application layer. Currently, like the things that were shown in the video, can it walk my dog, right? So we currently offer a number of applications that our customers can use that we recommend based on the data we know about their pets. So that's kind of the grand vision of what we're building.
Дякую, thank you. Yaroslav, you were born in Kyiv some 30 years ago. Yeah, just recently celebrated your birthday. Is Ukraine land of opportunity? We just heard about everything that happened in Leonard, Korea, here in the United States, the land of opportunity. You come here, you do great things. What about Ukraine?
Sure. I am very much convinced that today Ukraine is one of the best places in the world to build a global-scale innovative technology company. And I can easily explain why. So there are 3 reasons why that is a fact. One is that Ukraine has an exceptional breadth of talent. I mean breadth. I mean that Ukraine is maybe like one of a dozen countries in the world that can build an airplane. Why? Because building something like airplane requires very wide range of expertise. Material science, electronics, avionics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The educational system that still is intact in Ukraine prepares all of this wide range of specialists. But the second very unique thing, so Ukraine is literally like one of maybe a dozen countries in the world that has a talent of that breadth, talent pool. The second thing is that now all of these amazing educated people in modern economy, that's like the least expensive educated labor in the world. Like literally, like I don't have like the exact data to state about the world, but literally definitely in Europe, I've seen data to prove that. And like China is maybe 2 to 3 times more expensive. India is more expensive these days. So you have these amazingly talented people for less than almost anywhere else. And the third thing is that you have an amazing amount of passion in Ukraine. So think about it. Ukraine did not have its own sovereignty as a state for over 300 years. And then recently we got it, about 30 years ago. And then once we got it, for these 30 years, we've seen 3 revolutions, basically. If you count Revolution na Graniti, 90s, and then Orange Revolution, and the Revolution of Dignity. So it's about like 1 revolution per every 10 years, so I think we have another 5 years of calm period, hopefully. Just kidding, hopefully 3 will be enough. But that actually shows the incredible passion of Ukrainian people. And if you live in Kiev these days, and by the way, I don't consider myself an immigrant, I consider myself an expat. I live in San Francisco for the most of the last 5 years, but I hope that I will be spending more time in Kiev in the future. So if you visit Kiev these days, it's no mistake to say that Kiev is the new Berlin. It's a place that flourishes with culture, with music, with art, with beautiful restaurants, beautiful buildings, beautiful architecture, everything. So that is a manifestation of that passion that you have in Ukrainian people these days. So when you combine those 3, the breadth of talent, the accessibility of this talent, and the passion, Ukraine is probably the only place in the world where you have those components. And those are crucially important to build a strong company. And then if you think about it, what is lacking is actually, I believe what is lacking is ambition. And what is lacking is some managerial expertise. So if you can connect those benefits that Ukraine has with global markets and with global managerial expertise, then you have a path to success, right? So what we've been able to do, we were crazy enough to start this ridiculous thing. Like, think about it. Like a camera with a laser pointer to play with cats. You want to sell it for $200? You crazy. No one's going to buy that. Especially when you're starting that in Ukraine, where, like, come on, like $200 for a cat camera? Really? But if you combine that kind of craziness and ambition with a talent pool, and if you're able to attract the top talent for management, as we were lucky enough to do, thanks to the funding we were able to attract from investors and so on. So our VP of Engineering is in California, or our Chief Revenue Officer in California, and so on. Then it's a recipe for a big success in Ukraine. I actually had an article in this magazine called Новое Время, where I outlined like five potential areas for where one can build a global company out of Ukraine, and those are in heavy industries, light industries, education, food, and entertainment, and I can talk more about those.
Thank you. So, talent, passion, Ukraine, corruption. How did you manage to create the company that is a global company? You're selling your cameras in how many countries?
I think 18. About 18 these days.
Your office is in Kyiv, in San Francisco. Do you have an office in China, or am I mistaken? And you are a young entrepreneur.
Not so young anymore, you know.
Not anymore. But seriously,
I wish I was.
Seriously, this is the question that's probably on many minds. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. You know, I really like this quote, and I'm not sure if he was the first guy who said this, but famous Ukrainian engineer Sergei Korolev, who is the father of cosmonautics, actually He made the first designs of the first rockets that actually he made design that took Yuri Gagarin into space and many others. He supposedly said that the one who wants to work looks for opportunities, and the one who doesn't looks for reasons. So I think that's a very inspiring quote, and whenever I hear from any like Ukrainian entrepreneur to someone who tries to criticize, someone who tries to do something that, oh yeah, you're never gonna do this because of corruption or because of like whatever global agendas and conspiracy theories and so on, most people who say that have not tried that hard to do that. And yes, there are challenges with corruption in Ukraine. But there is a way to work with that and work around that. That's just one of the challenges you have. At the same time, Ukraine has incredibly low taxing system. Like now, like if you work in Ukraine, it is possible to be completely like legally paying something about 5% tax, which is crazy. Nowhere in the world you have that.
Exactly.
And like you can think of corruption as kind of another tax on your business, which is actually still. I'm not saying that you should pay bribes, but it's like all the problems you encounter with corruption still kind of less than whatever you would pay here in the United States. So like there's on the ways, there's much more opportunity in Ukraine. And then for our business, we never encountered a single, well, maybe some like someone on the border would try to stop something from shipping to Ukraine. Was never critical. And the way the business is organized is PetCube is a Delaware C Corp, registered in the U.S. because we're doing business globally, and that's the easiest way to attract global level funding from global investors is to have a C Corp. And then our largest office is indeed in Kyiv, and it's an R&D office. All the design, all the both hardware and software design, and logistics and operations, and some marketing even, and some customer support is done in Kyiv. So we have an R&D office there, and then obviously a company in office in San Francisco, office in China. So that all works very well. And by the way, the video you've seen, that was made completely by our team in Kyiv. So we didn't hire any like production agency. We actually have an in-house videographer. We have actually started doing some work for our friends. So basically, the design team of PetCube grew into a larger organization that is now like partner organization of PetCube, but we do some work for other people as well. But you would never believe something like that was filmed in Ukraine, right? And that was filmed for maybe 1/10 of the cost it would cost you to film that here. So Ukraine is indeed a land of opportunities if you know how to capture that.
Daka, thank you. So what was the biggest challenge for you, for your team when starting the business, your business, 5 years ago?
Yeah, well, as Leonard was speaking, it was just resonating so much because there were so many times where we were just on the brink of disaster, and we're like literally there were like dozens of times where we were like with months of cash on our bank account, and I'll tell you very like one of my favorite stories, I guess, about how this company survived one of those moments, and it was very early on. It was maybe 3 months after we started, maybe 4 months after we started, and there were only 3 founders. So Alex, he's a chief technical officer, and I'm a CEO, and then Andre, he's chief design officer, and in charge of these beautiful videos and beautiful industrial design and so on. And then we have tried to find a factory that will help us with manufacturing, and obviously we still were in Kyiv, so being very patriotic, we were trying to figure if any Ukrainian factory can produce these. and we worked with a couple of people, and they were like, just, like, one of them was clinically schizophrenic. Like, but you know, some of those people, they behave very normal, and you don't understand that they're fooling you. So we had that experience for maybe like month or month and a half, where the guy would promise us that he would produce our devices. And it was like crazy. But anyhow, it was a really hard experience. We were, at some point, we were like really desperate. We figured it's not going to happen. We had some troubles on other fronts. We weren't able to make the software work. So going from this prototype to a mass-produced device is like a really, really difficult path. So anyhow, we sit together in a coffee shop, and Alex and I, we start talking about, you know, like, probably this is like too much of a challenge. You know, this is a field we know very little about, the pet space, and we try to build a global company in manufacturing, and that software is like super difficult. We're like a bunch of 23-year-olds then with some work experience. Like, we were actually good at what we were doing back then, but, and we're like, we should give up, yeah, or we should put this aside. We should not be doing this. And it was after New Year's, and we were talking about that for about like 15 minutes, and Andre is silent, and then he's like, are you guys crazy? It's like, look what I have done for you. And he takes out of his pocket a bunch of business cards that are shaped like that hexagon cube, and that's indeed how our business cards look like. And he takes another thing, which is a card holder that is made of leather that is also shaped like that hexagon cube. That's black and really cool and really stylish. And he was like, I've made 6 of these so that only the top executives in the company have these. And this is my present for all of you for New Year's. How are you gonna stop doing this now? I was like, what? It's like, and the room changes color immediately, right? And we're like, yeah, we're gonna make it. Yeah, for sure, no, we'll find a way. And that's a very important lesson of leading by beauty, leading with beauty, leading by inspiration. There are many ways to lead, to be a leader. And that was one that our chief designer showed how he could be a leader and how he could basically change the direction of discussion with this one thing that is beautiful and very inspiring. So I think that's a great story.
That's a great story, beautiful story. How do you define success? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, you know, I think success has become almost, it's like a misused and kind of dirty-ish word sometimes when people start striving for success in life the same way as they're, you know, driving for money or fame or power. One of my good friends once told me that money, glory, and power are 3 things that will never make you happy. And I think that's a powerful statement. I think most of the things we make as people are driven by egos. And ego, in my opinion, is not a bad thing. It's actually a very natural thing that drives us to do many things, including great things, fantastic things that enrich other people's lives and make the world better and so on. So every person on this earth, they'll live trying to satisfy their ego one way or another. So I think success is when, you know, you do things that, besides satisfying your ego, actually make the world a better place and you know, create some value for other human beings. And then this brings you satisfaction, and then this helps you to live in this world and somehow bear all the suffering that is happening around by knowing that you are doing something to reduce the amounts of that suffering. So that for me is success. A successful person is someone who's working in that direction.
Дякую. Thank you. How's everybody doing? Good. Well, we do have some questions for both of you. And I'm going to start with you, Yaroslav. What do you like the most about your business?
Sorry, what do I like the most?
What do you like the most about your business?
I mean, look, I'm saving all the cats and dogs of the world from boredom. It's like cat photos, of course.
Your product is unique, isn't it? Is there a competition out
It
there?
is. It is an invention, and we've patented some of it, and there are some copies now, and people who are trying to imitate, but it's unique, I guess. And I mean, the kind of system that we're building, if we're successful, then we will literally transform the way people take care of their pets.
Thank you. And what about you, Leonard? What's the most important part in your business for you? What do you enjoy the most about your business?
Well, I think being in the pharmaceutical business, it's a little bit different. But what I always like about it is the fact that if you can be involved in anything that's life-saving, then there's a tremendous amount of reward from that. So at one time, I was involved in the launch of a drug. It was called ribavirin for the treatment of a rare respiratory virus called the respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. And it was a breakthrough at the time, and it was for infants that were immunocompromised, and they were going to die in these hospitals. So we launched that drug, and probably the most satisfying experience I ever had was with that drug, because when it was launched, I would get phone calls at the office from the parents and from doctors and nurses thanking us for the fact that we had come up with that drug. So again, the industry is one that if you can be involved in something like that, there's nothing better than that. There's no better feeling that you're doing something that's really helping mankind.
Saving lives, changing lives, influencing lives, right? Well, the question I have for both of you, what's the biggest challenge in any business? You decide who wants to answer first.
Well, I think, first of all, survival, and we've both said that here today. You have to be able to survive, and survival is key to everything. So no matter how it happens, I'm not saying you got to do everything and anything, but you have to really, really think long and hard. I love that story about what happened with your designer, with the business card, because it's kind of similar to what happened at an experience that I had at one point. I was at a company, it was public. We were running out of money, and on a Friday afternoon, one of our checks, the check started bouncing on our salespeople. And the vice president of sales and we commuted from New Jersey into the city here, back and forth. So we're driving back. It's Friday afternoon. We're on 80. And I said to him, he was totally depressed. So I said, you know what today is? He goes, no. I go, well, today happens to be the first day of the Nordstrom men's sale. And we're going to go to Nordstrom's right now in Paramus, and we're going to each buy a suit. And you're going to feel better, and I'm going to feel better. Right? Same difference, okay?
Thank you. Well,
if we're, if we survive, what is the next the most difficult, most important thing? I think that founders' values are very, and principles are very important. So the actionable piece of this is that if you want to be a better businessman, try to be a better person. And because, it's often being said, this is a kind of cliche, that people are the most important piece of the business. That's right, yeah, but actually the people you hire depends on who you are, and you are basically the first person in the business if you're a founder. So, yeah, it's like who you hire is often defined by your own values. So working on that is basically like the highest leverage you have to improve the business overall.
So your biggest challenge is probably also your most valuable asset, people that you hire, or the people that are involved in your business. I would think that probably people are also the most valuable asset. Would that be?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you asked about the challenge. So the challenge will be to keep improving yourself and like being like critical to yourself and so on. That's the challenge, I think.
What disappoints you most in people?
Nothing. I mean, I love people.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer. What about you?
Well, I've got many different experiences when it comes to that side. So you could have lots of respect, but if you get disappointed in somebody's performance because you hired wrong and you made a mistake, that's when your biggest disappointments start to occur. So, and that,
It's about you.
huh?
It's not about the people, it's about you.
It's about you because you made a mistake. You made the wrong judgment call, and that becomes an extreme disappointment. And when you have a smaller company, every hire you make is very, very critical. And so you can't afford to have those slip-ups, but they do occur. And the best solution is resolve it quickly. Don't let it drag out because it's poison, basically. So that's my experience.
You do get disappointed, though, and frustrated sometimes, and tired, perhaps. How do you handle disappointments, frustrations, failures? Do they happen in your lives?
I mean, like, frankly, I try not to get frustrated. I try not to get stressed. I think like how do you relieve
Leading to that.
Як ви розслабляєтеся? Я не напружуюся. Yeah, I think like the beginning of it is try to build the way to perceive the world that whenever something happens that's outside of your control, that cannot penetrate the shell of your integrity and your worldview, and you're like, okay, this happened, okay, well, I know how to react and so on. But I mean, like, they're very basic things. You like eat well, exercise, sleep well.
Or dance, right?
I do dance. Yes, that's right. I mean, I was asked to dance, perform here. I thought maybe it won't be the most appropriate thing, but it's like, yeah. I mean, or you can come to San Francisco. I'll take you with me on one of these dance parties. I literally go to dance party a couple times a week, where a bunch of people. It's like swing dancing or Lindy hop, traditional American dance, Ukrainian dancing. That start doing in Ukraine. So that's a lot of fun because that combines many things. It's like knowing your body and speaking with other people, and that every dance is improvisation. So it's like work of art, and it's very meditative. It's about learning about your body. It's about learning about things like masculinity and femininity. There's many things encapsulated in one. So because I'm an engineer, this efficiency really is appealing for me.
Thank you. And what about you, Leonard? How do you handle frustrations, disappointments?
I think what I learned a long time ago is keep the emotion out if you can. That's what I try to do. I try to make it as unemotional as possible, because if you start getting emotional, then it really has no place in the business world. So that's how basically I may get frustrated when I get home, but I'm not going to get frustrated in front of anybody in a company.
Well, thank you very much. I do have some closing questions, believe it or not, and this is one of those. Do you ever think about retirement, Leonard?
Well, here's my answer to that. I always tell everybody that I raised the retirement age in our company to 90.
Yaroslav, do you think about retirement?
I think about other things I want to do besides what I'm doing now. So is that retirement? No, but in a way.
There's no retirement in your world. That's what I understand. Right?
Maybe, but we still don't know about when it starts.
Thank you.
I think as long as there's a challenge out there, I'm ready to rise to the occasion. And what I find is it's kind of interesting that, especially in this industry, there's always something new that you come across. So last couple of years, for example, I was never in the biotechnology side. And somebody introduced me to two young inventors out of MIT that had come up with a method they had developed a non-immunogenic messenger RNA program that can basically be combined for gene editing and cell reprogramming. And their goal is to cure major diseases. And so that effort is going to take me for the next 20 years, I'm sure.
God willing.
So basically, but we're going to succeed on that side, and I'm going to be there when we do.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck to you with all of that. And, well, you partially answered, but I'm still going to ask that question. Music, dance, books, or movies?
Why do you have to choose only one?
Leonard?
Well, you have to understand this. When I was 17 years old, I started a rock and roll group called the Marauders. I was the lead singer in it, and even though I came from a very musical household, my mother played the piano and the mandolin, I sang in choirs and everything. Rock and roll is in my blood, and that's it.
So
I'm a
that
big rock
answers
and roll fan.
that answers the question: what kind of music do you like? Rock and roll. And Yaroslav, you like any?
Well, I love jazz. To be fair, I'm a little bit of a junkie. So like for the last 9 years, the only music I have is a swing jazz, kind of 20s, 30s era jazz. That's what plays in my headphones. But besides that, I think the recent looking at the recently released Ukrainian music, there are lots of gems there, and if no one have heard, I would highly recommend to listen to Dacha Bracha, which is extremely popular actually in the United States, and they come to San Francisco quite often, like a couple times a year, every year. And then there's Onuka, which is another electronic band, and I kind of, it's fascinating. I've been kind of looking into that more. With I think after the Revolution of Dignity, one of the laws that the new government has passed was to create these quotas on radios, so that something like first 50%, then 70% of all the music on radio has to be Ukrainian. And that resulted in a boom of great high-quality Ukrainian music in very different genres. Across the board, you now have Alona singing rap. I'm sure some people here have heard her. She is amazing. She's so talented. She's like literally Ukrainian Missy Elliott. It's like a big deal. Like Russians are like all over their head because she's so cool, and they're like, wow, she's so cool. And like electronics, and you have jazz with Jamala, and you have a bunch of stuff. So obviously you have Okan Elze, which is rock stars, and they are amazing. So I think lots of modern Ukrainian music. I'm really a big fan of that.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Are you kidding? I need coffee.
Coffee.
Tea.
It's brewing. Tea. Wine or scotch?
Water.
Cabernet.
Terrific. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Beauty.
Beauty. Beauty. And Leonard, for you, there's no answer?
I'd say the same.
What turns you off?
Incompetency.
Lack of integrity.
Thank you. What sound or noise do you like, Yaroslav?
I hope we will hear a signal from extraterrestrial civilization. I'd really like to hear that sound.
Leonard?
Kind of sound?
What kind of sound do you like?
My sports car when I accelerated.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty annoyed by things that are war related.
Anything that's too loud.
What are you most grateful for, Leonard?
I'm probably most grateful for the fact that my parents came here to this country, because it gave all of us a huge opportunity. They didn't get it, they couldn't take advantage of it, but they certainly made sure that I could take advantage of it. So I think anybody that comes here in that fashion should get on their hands and knees every night and thank God that they're here.
Thank you. Yaroslav?
Well, I'm also grateful to my parents, and I guess I'm grateful them for the kind of values they instilled and passions. And one of the big loves and passions is love for Ukraine, and we were always kind of consciously patriotic family, and I was lucky to born in the time and place where there are many things that can be changed and built, and almost like building the dreams of our grandparents, and building the things that many of them have lived for and died for, I feel it is very inspiring, and it is some kind of responsibility to, if you can build and create something, and I believe this is true for many Ukrainians and Ukrainian Americans, you should build the biggest thing you can possibly do. You should use yourself as a tool to the highest efficiency. So I'm very grateful to my parents for giving me that love for my people and my country.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your answers, and thank you very much for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Thank you. We'll just take a couple of questions from the audience, but we'll have more opportunity afterwards during the reception. Again, the program is in English, but if you like to ask the question in Ukrainian, please feel free to do so. I see the first question.
Who was asking? Hi, how are you? I just wanted to ask a follow-up question. I know that, Levko, you were talking about success in business and when success comes to you once. But you were mentioning success in business, you were mentioning success in society and personal. Do you believe that it's possible for one person to be successful in all those three areas of life simultaneously? I'm a business owner and I'm struggling with that. So I would like to ask you, since you've been obviously around for a little longer, and you've been very successful with building so many businesses.
Well, I think it's like this. I think, first of all, usually in a business world, there are trade-offs. You make a commitment to building something. You're committing to that, and usually you're doing it to the exclusion of others that are in your life, and it can be a difficult part of what you go through. So what it takes is it takes a very understanding spouse, which I was fortunate to have. So as a result, I'm going to celebrate my 52nd wedding anniversary next year. Yeah. All right? So you can do it. I'm not saying it's impossible. It may appear to be impossible, but you're. I think my wife would like to see me retire right now, but she understands.
Okay, thank you. Another question, Dr. Levko?
Це є питання для пана Ярослава. Я став вашим, I became your customer, вашим клієнтом. I have two Ukrainian French bulldogs з Білої церкви. Їх привіз в Америку. І, завдяки, thank you for UAPPA, I was always hoping to be able to connect with my pets from Ukraine, and I hated to leave them for work with my patients. So it was definitely, to know that it was a Ukrainian of all things, I just put the word out. I went to Chewy.com, I bought it. I worked on it from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, playing with it, and I was impressed by the way it is delivered. You have a beautiful package system. You have a beautiful, for a dummy like me, to just get this thing going. It was a wonderful experience. And for me, my question is this, is how do you are you able to be above the curve? Meaning that I was very impressed first at a delivery of a product, a gadget like this, okay, is so simply understood. And I've never had that before with many other gadgets that I bought. And I would like to, who thought about all these kind of steps and how to communicate them and how to deliver them in such a beautiful way? In this package, you package it so beautifully. It was, I didn't want to lose the package. So if you could give us that feel of how do you really get the final product out?
Sure. Well, thank you for all the compliments. It just melts my heart to hear this. Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? How do you make it a great product that is maybe better than most other things around? And there are basically two ways to make things. One is kind of reasoning by analogy and looking at something that already exists and transferring that knowledge to something that you want to create in a little bit different area. And another is kind of reasoning from the first principles, where you have the problem and you get really down to the basic, be it mathematical, physical, or humanitarian principles, and you try to derive, okay, how would the solution look like? In the case of PetCube, it was basically the combination of two, in a way. Okay, we have a problem that many people have when they leave their pets alone, as you had with your franchise in Bila Cerkva. And people, because pet is a member of family, people want to be connected with them, and will want to have ways to interact, right? So that's how the original design came to be, and we understood what is needed. Like needed a camera to see, and the speaker microphone to talk both ways, and the laser or treat dispenser to have some way of two-way interaction. But another way from a technical implementation standpoint, we just looked at the best things that exist out there in the world. We looked at electronics made by Sony, by Philips, by Brown, by Apple, and you have these best examples. They're out there. This is like you don't need to look for them too hard. The thing is, I guess that is challenging is for most people is to actually understand why this is beautiful and like what is beautiful. Like seeing the beauty is difficult. Once you see this and once you understand, then making that again is not so difficult. So once you understand that people really want easy setup, then you focus on that and then you spend your time. Once you understand that people like quite simple and elegant design that will work well with many modern interiors and so on, then you can do this. And I think a lot of that is a credit to one of my co-founders, Andre, who is, I met him, I built a previous business together with him. He was just out of this world, creative person. And the way I met him at online forum because he was one of the best poets I've ever read. So he would put his poetry online, and I loved it so much, and then he went into design. It's just like beauty, if you have a person who has a sense of beauty, that's very valuable and I think is underappreciated.
Thanks, Yaroslav. Thanks, Dr. Levko, for the question, because I just found out I have a pet relative because I was also born in Bila Cerkva. So thank you. Yes. So maybe two more questions, quick questions.
Give me a second. Hi, hello. My question is for Yaroslav. So you have a precedent of successfully exiting a business in your past, which I'm sure has helped you a lot with this endeavor. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience in raising institutional capital, and more specifically, what you look for in an institutional partner, and how do you balance raising enough capital to grow your business, but also making sure that you're keeping enough equity in your business with your partners as well?
Yeah, thanks. Great questions. The previous company that I've built was very, very small online advertising boutique in Kiev. We had 5 people when we sold the company to another advertising agency. It was not a big deal at all. Probably some previous experience helped, of course, but nothing comparable at all. And then, at PEC we've raised some over $20 million in capital, in an ideal situation, you are the hot company that everyone wants to invest in, and everyone just throws money at you, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna choose these guys, and they have a good name, and they have status, and they have knowledge, and also these guys because I need their expertise and so on. In our case, it wasn't like that. In our case, literally, of the last 5 years, 70% of my time I was spending fundraising, which is super unhealthy for business because the time I'm spending fundraising, I'm not spending building my company. This means that I need to work another work day to be building my company on top of that, right? Speaking of getting institutional financing, my advice is, I guess, between optimizing for a bigger name and optimizing for raising money faster, I would go for raising money faster. And then when building a business plan, make sure that you have these milestones when you see, okay, if I reach this amount of revenue or customers or whatever, or like get to this stage of drug experiments or whatever it be, I can raise that much capital, and I know that there are these funds that will invest and so on. So the kind of mapping that step-by-step path and fundraising, I think, is important, because if you map that in the wrong way, then you have a situation where if it's a business that is venture funded, you will be in a situation where you need money to keep going, but you didn't reach the stage where you can raise money. But then, look, like many of our investors are Ukrainian, and the way I think about it is that I want to make those people wealthy because they're Ukrainian. It's like I want to give those people a chance to invest in my company because I just love folks from Ukraine, and I want Ukraine to have more wealthy people, more successful investors that will invest in more entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are super important for the development of the country. So that's kind of my emotional kind of side, and I try to balance that with business rationale, which is kind of obvious. You want to find investors that are reliable, have good reputation, have knowledge in your industry, and can bring you new business or whatever. So I guess all of those factors come into play.
Thank you, Yaroslav. We have another question. I think it would be the last one because of the timing. So please.
Okay. Here's a question to both of you. We had an amazing story about the successful story about your business, and I would like to ask this question to both. Do you have any plan towards Ukraine? Yaroslav partially asked this question, but I have a question to both of you. Possibly inspiration for young people in Ukraine. Do you have any plan to come to Ukraine, Leonard? You or your family or your children or grandchildren, do you have any plan of that? And about the Yaroslav too. Thank you.
Actually, I've had previous experiences in Ukraine back in the mid-90s. I formed a partnership with Robinson Lake Lair in Montgomery, and we had a consulting office run by somebody from here for about 4 years, where I can't say it was positive at the end. That anything that we attempted to do was met with complete failure. We had at the time some of the largest corporations here that were our clients looking to do business, and it was a bad time to go there. It was just not the right time. And the only thing that saved us was unfortunately the individual that we had running that office passed away suddenly, so we shut it all down. Since that time, I have looked at various pharmaceutical opportunities as recently as about 3-4 years ago. At one point, my partner and I, we owned a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant that was about 1 million square feet here in the United States, one of the world's largest, and we were going to attempt to do something where we would manufacture bulk drug here, ship it to Ukraine for packaging, and then put "Made in USA" on it, and but I just couldn't get it together. So it's not that I have a healthy degree of skepticism about it, about doing business there, because I feel it's challenging enough to succeed here, and then try to succeed in another country where you don't have the connections that you need, you don't have the ability to appreciate all the nuances that are important to make judgment calls about. I think it's a difficult proposition for somebody like myself. I think in your case, Yaroslav, it's different. You're from there, you know the people, you know the customs, you have a great understanding of it.
For me, it's more difficult to succeed here.
Correct. So it's just, but you are succeeding and you have succeeded. So that's what's important. But I think at some point, I happen to think that there's a great amount of potential there, just as Yaroslav has said. I just think that the country really needs to adopt either the Korean model, the Taiwanese model, but one of those Asian models where they can bring in low-cost manufacturing, set up enterprise zones that would be totally protected legally from any attempts at corruption, and I think they could succeed because they have a very talented, highly educated workforce, and I think Ukraine could become the next Korea very easily, but it's going to take a lot of willpower and vision to be able to execute that. But I think somebody's going to come along and do that one day.
Yeah, I second that. There is actually a great book on that called How Asia Works. Yeah, very, very inspiring. And I know that many of the members of the modern Ukrainian elite, or kind of the younger part of that elite, have read the book and are thinking that way.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for the questions. Again, you'll have more opportunity to ask questions during our reception, so I welcome you to join and stay. And I'll turn it over to Ivana for the final thoughts and remarks.
Thank you, Anya. Gentlemen, again, thank you very, very much for being here with us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for inspiring stories. And we wish you all the best in everything that you do. I thank our audience for being here, our sponsors, everybody who helped us to put this event together. And I do want to thank those people who actually literally put this event together. And these are the members of the Ukrainian American Business Association, Anya Shpuk, Natalia Жизномирська, Василь Тесха, Юрій Вовк, Олена Шарван, Оксана Шеремета,
And of course, Ivana Lotoshinsky and also Olena Sidlovich from Ukrainian Institute and Irina Stepanchuk, of course. So thank you very much. And again, stay tuned for our future events. Of course, this is part of the series Hourglass, so hopefully we'll see you next time.
Дуже дякуємо. І зараз в нас буде гарна вечеря, яка є спонсорована рестораном «Веселка». Thank you. Дякуємо. Смачного.